Iran, something entirely inexplicable took place. Time and time again, despite losing on the battlefield, losing their capitals, and enduring occupation, the Iranians did something no one else in the world could do. For millennia, the greatest empires in the world made the exact same fatal mistake. They marched onto the Iranian plateau with swords drawn, absolutely certain they could wipe this civilization off the face of the earth forever. The Macedonian phalanxes of Alexander the Great invaded here. Ruthless Roman legions marched here. Arab armies swept in under the banners of a new religion, and the ferocious Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan tore through, leaving behind nothing but towers of skulls. Any other nation would have vanished permanently after suffering such a catastrophic number of blows. They would have dissolved into the genetic and cultural melting pot of history, just as it happened with the Babylonians, the Hittites, or the Assyrians. The Iranians did something no one else in the world could do. They absorbed their conquerors. Just a few decades would pass, and the brutal invaders would begin speaking the Persian language, building Persian architecture, adopting their state bureaucracy, and even wearing their clothes. Again and again, the East essentially digested the West and the nomads. How has Iran managed, from antiquity right up to the present day, to force every major world power to reckon with it? How did they preserve their identity? And how did it happen that Great Persia, a country with a 5,000-year history, voluntarily abandoned its legendary name, forcing the entire world to call it Iran? This is the story of how a single nation invented the concept of time we live in today, turned geopolitics into a holy war between light and dark, and learned how to lose battles in order to ultimately win eternity. To understand the depth of this civilization, we need to rewind time far back. Traditionally, the Western world considers Mesopotamia, meaning Sumer and Babylon, or ancient Egypt, to be the cradle of civilization. In this worldview, Iran is often sidelined, and that is a massive historical injustice. Evolution took its natural course here. 50,000 years ago, Neanderthals dominated these lands, only to be replaced by Cro-Magnons 36,000 years ago. But the real revolution began later. Archaeologists have discovered urban-type settlements on Iranian territory, like the Jiroft culture and the Sialk ziggurat, dating back 6,000 to 7,000 years. Ceramic vessels from the 4th millennium before Christ irrefutably prove one of the oldest civilizations on the planet evolved right here, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mesopotamia and China. The first major geopolitical player in these lands was Elam, a state in the southwest of modern Iran with its capital in the city of Susa. The Elamites were so powerful that by the 26th century before Christ, they were practically dictating their will to the Sumerians. But the most mind-blowing event happened in the 23rd century before Christ, when the Akkadian king Naram-Sin went to war with Elam. The conflict didn't end with a simple truce. A written treaty was signed. It guaranteed Elam's independence on the condition that they aligned their foreign policy with Akkad. Think about that. This is the first documented international treaty in human history. The Iranian space stood at the very origins of global diplomacy. Genetically, however, the Elamites were closer to the people of Mesopotamia. The people we call Iranians today arrived here later. Sometime between the 20th and 15th centuries before Christ, nomadic tribes began descending onto this mountainous plateau from the north, from the steppes of Central Asia and the Caucasus. They belonged to the giant family of Indo-European nations, representing its distinct Indo-Iranian branch. Amazingly, their ancient language was a direct relative of Latin, Greek, and the languages spoken across all of Europe today, including English and Spanish. Settling on these lands, they began calling themselves Aryans, meaning noble, and named their new homeland Arianem Veja, the land of the Aryans. Over time, this word morphed into the familiar name we know as Iran. They mixed with the ancient culture of Elam and split into powerful alliances, the most famous of which became the Medes and the Persians. It was right here, in these harsh mountains and deserts, that the primary weapon of the Iranians was born. It was not chariots, nor was it special bows. It was ideology. Long before the emergence of Christianity and Islam, a religion was born on the Iranian plateau that turned human consciousness upside down: Zoroastrianism. For the ancient Iranian, life was not simply a series of meaningless accidents or a cyclical changing of seasons. The universe was perceived as the battlefield of a total, uncompromising war between Ahura Mazda, the transcendent god of light, truth, and order, and Ahriman, the spirit of absolute evil, lies, and darkness. And most importantly, Zoroastrianism clearly mapped the geography of this evil. The realm of darkness was considered to be the nomadic expanse of Eurasia, Turan, from which devastating raids were constantly launched. To be Iranian meant to be a warrior of light. Their entire culture, poetry, and statehood were built on the idea of actively assisting the forces of good. This concept gave the nation phenomenal unity. But Zoroastrianism did something even more massive. This tradition was the first in history to declare, time does not move in a circle. Time is linear. The world had a beginning, creation, and it will have an inevitable end. A final battle between light and dark, a purification of the world by fire, and a last judgment. How did this idea conquer the world? When the Persians conquered Babylon in the 6th century before Christ, they liberated the Jews who were languishing there in captivity. Judea became a province of the Persian Empire for 2 centuries. During this period of close contact, Jewish thinkers adopted from the Zoroastrians the culture of anticipating the end of times, linear time, and the final judgment. Later, this doctrine flowed into Christianity and Islam. Prominent philosophers, including Friedrich Nietzsche, acknowledged that Iran played the key role in discovering linear time, the coordinates within which we still think today. The first truly great state of the Aryans was Media, formed in 670 before Christ. The Medes did not last long, but they managed to destroy the formidable Assyrian Empire. Their hegemony was cut short by their own relatives, the Persians. In 550 before Christ, a man named Cyrus the Great, half Persian, half Mede, united his two peoples, the tribes of the Persians and the Medes. Out of this union, he began building what historians would call the Achaemenid Empire, the first superpower in history. Cyrus was different from the tyrants of the past. When conquering Lydia, the Greek city-states of Asia Minor, or Babylon, he did not destroy their temples, nor did he enslave their populations. He built an empire on respect. His successor, Darius I, expanded the borders from Egypt to the Indus Valley. Nearly 50 million people, half the population of the earth at that time, lived under Persian rule. Darius divided the country into 20 administrative districts called satrapies, introduced a unified tax system, minted gold coins known as darics, and laid down a network of roads along which the fastest state postal service in the world raced. But history does not forgive weakness. In an attempt to secure the empire from the nomadic darkness, Cyrus the Great ventured into Central Asia to wage war against the Massagetæ tribe, and there the greatest emperor met his end. The battle was so brutal that the Persian army was annihilated. According to Herodotus, the leader of the Massagetæ, Queen Tomyris, seeking revenge for the death of her son, ordered her men to find the body of Cyrus. She cut off his head and threw it into a leather sack filled to the brim with human blood, declaring, "You thirsted for blood, now drink your fill." Despite this tragedy, the empire lived on. We are used to thinking that the famous Greco-Persian wars, the ones with the 300 Spartans, crushed the Persians. That is a Western myth. Yes, the Greeks defended their independence. But for the giant Achaemenid Empire, losing a couple of fringe cities was like a mosquito bite. The Persians simply changed tactics. They began funding first Athens, then Sparta, pitting the Greeks against each other. Ultimately, in 387 before Christ, the exhausted Greeks were forced to sign a humiliating treaty on the terms of the Persian king Artaxerxes. What the Persians could not take with a massive army, they bought. Persia became the undisputed master of Greece without firing a single shot.